Terra revealed its secret. Cosmic quiet ensued. Part 1. The Galactic Ultimatum. The Great Hall of Concord Station Prime was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were covered with the flags of 12 spacefaring civilizations, each one older than human recorded history. The floor was made from crystal mined from dying stars, and it glowed with a soft blue light that never faded. Ambassador of the Dominion walked across this floor with the confidence of someone who owned the galaxy. His species had ruled their corner of space for 40,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed rivals, and built a civilization that stretched across 10,000 star systems. Humans, by comparison, were children. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 300 years ago. Their territory was small. Their fleet was modest. Their technology was acceptable but nothing special. The Concord of 12 had allowed them to exist as a provisional member because they were useful for labor and showed some potential. Nothing more. But now the humans had become annoying. They had expanded into the Arcturus corridor without proper permission. They had built shipyards that produced vessels at an uncomfortable rate. They had started asking questions about Concord policies and suggesting changes to ancient laws. It was time to remind them of their place. Four eyes scanned the human delegation as he entered the meeting chamber. There were 5 of them, dressed in simple uniforms. At their center stood Admiral Helena, a woman of 60 years with silver hair cut short and eyes that revealed nothing. She was the highest-ranking military officer humanity had ever sent to a Concord meeting. This pleased. It meant they were taking this seriously. "Admiral," he said through his translator device, "thank you for coming on such short notice." "Ambassador," she replied with a small nod. "The message said this matter was urgent. We came as quickly as we could." "Indeed it is urgent." Move to the center of the room where a holographic display flickered to life. It showed a map of human space, with the Arcturus corridor highlighted in red. "Your species has expanded beyond its agreed boundaries. Your shipyards have exceeded their approved capacity. Your government has failed to respond to 17 formal complaints from Concord members." His expression did not change. "We have responded to each complaint through proper diplomatic channels. If those responses were unsatisfactory, we were not informed." They were unsatisfactory. His mandibles clicked together, a sign of irritation among his people. "The Concord has been patient with humanity. We have overlooked many small violations because we understood that your species is young and still learning, but patience has limits." He gestured, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed the massed fleets of the Concord, assembled at the edge of human space. 400,000 warships from 12 civilizations, representing more firepower than humanity had ever seen in one place. "You will cede the Arcturus corridor to joint Concord administration," announced. "You will reduce your naval presence to defensive patrols only. Your shipyards will accept Concord oversight. These terms are not open for discussion." The other representatives in the chamber watched with satisfaction. The hegemony delegate, a tall being covered in silver scales, smiled with too many teeth. The collective's representative, a cluster of small creatures that shared one mind, hummed with approval. Even the normally neutral a federation seemed pleased. Admiral looked at the display showing the massive fleet. She looked at the faces of the alien ambassadors. She looked at, who stood before her with the certainty of someone who had never been refused. "And if we decline these terms?" she asked. Spread his 4 arms in a gesture of false sympathy. "Then the Concord will have no choice but to escort humanity back to its proper place. Your colonies will be evacuated. Your fleets will be dismantled. Your species will be confined to Earth and its immediate solar system until such time as you demonstrate the maturity required for galactic citizenship." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. This is not a threat, Admiral. It is simple reality. The Conquered has existed for 100,000 years. We have dealt with difficult species before. Humanity can accept its limitations gracefully, or it can learn them through harder lessons. The choice is yours. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to stop humming. Every eye, every sensor, every attention was focused on the small group of humans standing before the might of galactic civilization. Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that nobody expected. She smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible. But it was real, and it reached her eyes, and something about it made confidence flicker for just a moment. "I appreciate your directness," Ambassador said. Her voice was calm and steady. "These are significant terms. I will need to consult with Earth Command before providing our official response." "Of course," recovered his composure quickly. "We are reasonable beings. You have 72 standard hours to accept our terms. After that, the fleet will begin its advance." Nodded. 72 hours, understood. She turned to leave, and her delegation followed. At the door, she paused and looked back at. That small smile was still on her face. "Ambassador, may I ask you something?" "You may ask." "In all your history, in all those 100,000 years, have you ever wondered why humanity has been so quiet? Why we have accepted every insult, every limitation, every condescending lecture about our youth and inexperience?" His eyes narrowed. "Because you are wise enough to know your place." "Perhaps," smile widened just slightly. "Or perhaps not. We will speak again in 72 hours, Ambassador. I suspect it will be a very interesting conversation." She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. In the great chamber, the representatives of the Conquered exchanged glances. The delegate laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping metal. "The humans think they can negotiate from a position of weakness. How amusing." Said nothing. He was still staring at the door where Admiral had stood. That smile. There had been something wrong about that smile. It had not been the smile of someone who had been defeated. It had been the smile of someone who knew a secret. He pushed the thought away. Humans were emotional creatures. They often showed confidence they did not truly possess. It meant nothing. But later that night, alone in his quarters, found himself unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that smile. And somewhere deep in his ancient brain, in the part that his species had evolved over millions of years to recognize danger, a small alarm was beginning to sound. Terra revealed its secret. Cosmic quiet ensued. Part 2: The Whisper in the Dark. The moon had been hollow for 150 years. Most humans did not know this. Most humans believed that Luna Base was simply a military installation built into the lunar surface, home to training facilities and communication arrays. They did not know about the tunnels that went down and down and down, past 17 security checkpoints, through 3 kilometers of the most advanced shielding ever created. Director Wei knew. He was one of perhaps 1,000 people in all of human space who knew the full truth about Project Prometheus. He stood now in the deepest chamber of Luna Base, surrounded by walls of monitors that showed feeds from across the galaxy. Some showed the Conquered fleet massed at the border. Some showed shipping lanes and trade routes. Some showed empty patches of space that appeared to contain nothing at all. It was these last monitors that Wei watched most carefully. His communicator buzzed. He answered it without looking away from the screens. Director Admiral's face appeared on a small display near his hand. She was still aboard her transport, returning from Conquered Station. "I assume you watched the meeting." Every word. Wei's voice was soft, almost gentle. He was a small man with a kind face, the sort of person you might mistake for a librarian or a teacher. This appearance had served him well over the years. 72 hours. Yes, they gave us an ultimatum. There was no fear in his voice. They want the Arcturus corridor, control of our shipyards, and a permanent leash around our neck. They want us to be pets. Wei finally turned away from the monitors. They have always wanted us to be pets, useful little creatures that do as we are told and never cause problems. The Conquered has done this before to other species. The refused similar terms 2,000 years ago. They no longer exist. I know. Wei moved to a different console and began entering commands. I have studied every species the Conquered has destroyed, absorbed, or neutralized. I have read their histories, their strategies, their final transmissions. Do you know what they all had in common? Tell me. They showed their strength too early. Wei's fingers moved across the controls. They built a powerful fleet and threatened the Conquered directly. The Conquered united against them and crushed them within a decade. The End tried to form alliances with other oppressed species. The Conquered infiltrated their network and destroyed them from within. The Kelvin hegemony developed weapons that could have challenged Conquered dominance. The Conquered learned of these weapons and struck before they could be deployed. He stopped typing and looked at its image. Every species that challenged the Conquered did so openly. They announced their strength. They made threats. They gave the Conquered time to respond, to unite, to focus all their resources on a single target. And we did not. No, Wei smiled, and it was the same smile had shown to, the smile that had disturbed the alien ambassador's sleep. We learned from their mistakes. We played weak. We accepted insults. We let them think we were exactly what they wanted us to be. He pressed a final command, and the monitors around him came alive with new images. Ships, massive ships, larger than anything the Conquered had ever built, larger than anything they had ever imagined. They hung in the darkness between stars, in places where no sensors looked and no patrols traveled. Their hulls were black as the void itself, and their engines were cold and silent, waiting. The Prometheus class, Wei said, 18 vessels, each one 17 kilometers long, each one powered by a captured singularity, each one carrying 3,000 strike craft in its belly. Studied the images. Even though she had seen these ships before, even though she had helped design the strategy that brought them into existence, the sight of them still filled her with something close to awe. How do we hide them? She asked. For 200 years, how do we keep this secret? We built them in the dark places, in the spaces between stars where nothing lives and no one goes. We used materials that could not be traced. We recruited engineers and workers who believed in the mission so completely that they took the secret to their graves. Wei pulled up another display showing a timeline of human history since first contact. Every failed weapons test was deliberate. Every diplomatic retreat was planned. Every time we asked the Conquered for technology transfers, we already had better technology hidden away. We let them see only what we wanted them to see. A mask. Yes, a mask of weakness, a mask of harmlessness. Wei's gentle face hardened slightly. We remembered our own history, Admiral. We remembered what happened to civilizations that revealed their strength before they were ready. The Native Americans, the countless nations crushed by empires before they could develop. We learned from their tragedy. Was quiet for a moment, and now the mask comes off. Now the mask comes off. Wei entered one final command. I am sending the activation signal. All 18 Prometheus vessels will begin power-up sequences. They will be fully operational within 60 hours. That leaves us 12 hours before the Conquered deadline. Yes. Wei looked at the monitors showing the Conquered fleet at the border. 400,000 ships, representing the combined might of 12 ancient civilizations. They believe they are dealing with a young species that has no choice but to submit. They believe the universe works the way it has always worked, with the strong dominating the weak and the old ruling the young. He watched as, one by one, the Prometheus vessels began to awaken. Their engines started to glow with a light that was not quite real, bending space around them in ways that Conquered physics said was impossible. They are about to learn that humans do not play by old rules. Far across the galaxy, in 18 different locations, the greatest warships ever built began their journey toward human space. They moved through methods the conquered did not understand, covering distances that should have taken years in mere hours. The crews of these vessels were the best humanity had to offer. They had trained in secret for decades. They had studied every conquered species, every conquered weapon, every conquered tactic. They knew exactly what they were facing, and they knew exactly what they were capable of. None of them were afraid. On the bridge of the TSS Prometheus itself, Captain Sarah watched her ship come fully alive around her. Systems that had been sleeping for years hummed with power. Weapons that existed only in theoretical papers began their calibration sequences. The ship's AI, a consciousness that had been waiting patiently in the dark, spoke its first words in 5 years. "All systems operational, Captain. We are ready to serve." Nodded, she thought about the generations of humans who had worked and sacrificed and kept silent so that this moment could happen. Engineers who had died never seeing their creations deployed. Soldiers who had trained for wars they hoped would never come. Politicians who had smiled and bowed and accepted insults, while their hearts burned with the knowledge of what was hidden in the dark. "Signal the fleet," she said. "We move in 48 hours. It's time to show them who we really are." The Prometheus turned toward human space, and 17 sister ships followed. The galaxy was about to change forever. Terra revealed its secret. Cosmic quiet ensued. Part 3: The Revelation. The 72nd hour arrived, and the conquered fleet waited. Ambassador stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's pride, watching the empty space before him. Behind his vessel stretched the greatest armada ever assembled in galactic history. 400,000 warships from 12 civilizations, each one crewed by beings who had never known defeat. News drones from across the galaxy broadcast the scene to trillions of viewers. Commentators discussed what would happen next. Most agreed that the humans would surrender within 6 hours. Some thought it might take 12. A few optimistic souls suggested the humans might hold out for a full day before accepting reality. No one expected what actually happened. "Ambassador," his tactical officer said suddenly, "we are detecting an unusual energy signature." "Where?" "Everywhere." Before could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. The TSS Prometheus emerged from nothing. One moment there was empty void. The next moment there was a ship so large that it blocked out the stars behind it. 17 kilometers of black metal and impossible angles, covered with weapons that pulsed with energy that made conquered sensors scream warnings. And then another ship appeared, and another, and another. 18 vessels in total, each one identical to the first. They materialized through tiers in spacetime that should not have existed, using technology that violated every law of physics the conquered understood. The bridge of the Dominion's pride erupted into chaos. "Impossible," someone said. "That drive technology is impossible." "Those energy readings cannot be correct," another voice insisted. "Recalibrate the sensors." "They are correct," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "Ambassador, each of those vessels is reading as a greater threat than our entire border fleet, combined." Stared at the wall of ships before him. His 4 eyes could not process what they were seeing. These vessels were not just larger than anything the conquered had built. They were generations beyond anything the conquered had imagined. A transmission cut through all frequencies. Every screen on every ship in the conquered armada suddenly displayed the same image: Admiral Helena standing on the bridge of the Prometheus. Behind her, crew members moved with calm efficiency at stations filled with technology that looked like magic. "This is Admiral Helena of the Terran Defense Force," she announced. Her voice was steady, almost pleasant. You have assembled your fleets at our border with the intention of forcing humanity into submission. We understand. The galaxy has always belonged to the strong. She paused, and the Prometheus's weapon systems came online. The power readings were so high that several conquered ships' sensors actually shut down to protect themselves from overload. We have been strong for a very long time. We simply chose not to show it. Around the conquered armada, the 18 began to move. They spread out in a formation that slowly surrounded the 400,000 alien ships, like wolves circling a flock of sheep. For 200 years, while you looked down on us and lectured us about our place in the galaxy, we were building. In the dark spaces between stars, in the void where no one looks, we constructed weapons you cannot understand using science you do not possess. Strike craft began launching from the bellies of the thousands upon thousands of small, fast vessels that moved in perfect coordination. Each one was armed with weapons that could destroy a conquered cruiser in a single shot. You assumed our silence meant weakness. You assumed our patience meant fear. You assumed that because we did not fight back against your insults, we could not fight back. Admiral smiled. It was the same smile she had shown to 3 days ago, the smile that had haunted his sleep. You were wrong. On the bridge of the Dominion's pride finally found his voice. This is a trick, some kind of deception. These readings must be false. They are not false, Ambassador. His tactical officer had given up trying to make sense of the numbers. I have confirmed with 17 independent sensor systems. Those ships are real. That firepower is real. Then we fight. Turn to his communications officer. Signal all conquered vessels. Attack Formation Delta. We will show these humans that. Ambassador, the tactical officer's voice was very quiet now. I have run the projections, all of them. And we would last approximately 11 minutes, perhaps 12 if we coordinated perfectly. There would be no survivors. Stared at his officer. In 40 years of military service, he had never heard such complete certainty in a prediction of defeat. Admiral's voice continued over the transmission. You may leave now. You may return to your worlds and tell them what you have seen. You may inform the conquered that humanity is no longer a provisional member to be ordered around. We are not asking for territory. We are not demanding tribute. We simply want what we have always wanted, to be left alone to grow at our own pace and find our own way. They stopped moving. Their weapons remained powered but did not fire. The thousands of strike craft held their positions in perfect stillness. Or you may stay, said. You may decide that your pride is worth more than your lives. You may convince yourselves that our weapons are not as powerful as they seem, that your numbers will overwhelm us, that the old ways of the galaxy will triumph over this new thing you face. Her smile faded, replaced by something cold and hard. I would advise against this choice. We have waited 200 years for this moment. We have prepared very carefully. We know exactly what we are capable of, and we are not bluffing. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the conquered fleet. Looked at his bridge crew. He looked at the impossible vessels surrounding his armada. He thought about his family, his civilization. He thought about the who had refused to back down and no longer existed. He thought about Admiral's smile, and he finally understood what it meant. It was the smile of someone who had been insulted and ignored and pushed aside for centuries, and who had spent every single day of those centuries preparing for this exact moment. It was the smile of patience rewarded. It was the smile of power that no longer needed to hide. Signal the fleet, said quietly. All ships are to power down weapons and prepare to withdraw. His second officer stepped forward. Ambassador, we cannot simply retreat. The conquered has never faced anything like this. Watched as the first ships began to turn away from human space. The old rules no longer apply. We need to go home and think very carefully about what happens next. One by one, The mightiest armada in galactic history retreated from the border of human space. News drones captured everything. Across 1,000 worlds, trillions of beings watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened. The humans had won without firing a single shot. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. Terra revealed its secret. Cosmic quiet ensued. Part 4. The Weight of Revelation. In the days that followed the revelation, the galaxy held its breath. The conquered fleet scattered back to their home systems. Ambassadors who had spent decades looking down on humanity now refused to take calls from their governments. Military commanders who had promised easy victory resigned their positions in shame. Intelligence agencies that had assured their leaders that humans were no threat began desperately searching for any record, any hint, any clue they might have missed. They found nothing. The humans had hidden their secret perfectly. On Conquered Station Prime, the emergency session lasted 9 days. Representatives who had never raised their voices before now screamed at each other across the Great Hall. The blamed the for failed surveillance. The blamed the collective for diplomatic complacency. The collective blamed everyone else for ignoring their warnings about human unpredictability. Everyone blamed everyone else. No one could accept that they had all been fooled. "How did they build such vessels without us knowing?" demanded the delegate, his silver scales flashing with agitation. "We have monitored their shipyards. We have tracked their resource consumption. Nothing indicated construction on this scale." "They built in the void," answered an intelligence analyst, exhausted from days of searching for answers. "In the empty spaces where we never thought to look. They used materials we cannot trace through methods we do not understand." Impossible. No species could maintain such secrecy for 2 centuries. And yet they did. The arguments continued, but they were meaningless. The reality was simple and unavoidable. Humanity had outmaneuvered the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. They had watched and learned and planned while pretending to be harmless. They had accepted every insult and absorbed every humiliation, and all the while they had been building weapons that could destroy everything the conquered had created. And now those weapons were pointed at the galaxy. But then something strange happened, something that terrified the conquered even more than themselves. The humans did nothing. The Prometheus fleet returned to the shadows. Human diplomats returned to their posts, polite and professional as always. Trade routes reopened. The human ambassador to the conquered, a young woman named Dr. Sarah, attended meetings and answered questions and smiled at species who had been ready to destroy her civilization just days before. No demands were made. No territory was claimed. No punishment was sought for centuries of disrespect and near genocide. 2 weeks after the revelation, Ambassador requested a private meeting with Admiral. She agreed without hesitation. They met on a neutral station, in a small room with comfortable chairs and a window that looked out at the stars. Arrived first and was already sitting when entered. She stood to greet him, which surprised him. It was a sign of respect that he had not expected. "Ambassador," she said, "thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to meet." Settled into a chair designed for his species, his 4 eyes studied carefully. "I must confess I have many questions." "I expected you would. The most important one is simply, why?" He spread his 4 arms in a gesture of confusion. "You have revealed a fleet that could challenge the entire conquered. You could demand anything. You could take territory, extract tribute, establish dominance over the galaxy. Instead, you have done nothing. You have returned to your normal activities as if nothing has changed." Nodded slowly. She reached into a cabinet and produced a bottle of amber liquid and 2 glasses. "This is whiskey," she said, pouring. "A human drink. It takes years to make properly, and it gets better with patience." She slid a glass across the table. "Try it. I think you might appreciate the metaphor." Tasted the liquid cautiously. It burned slightly, but there was a complex flavor beneath the heat that surprised him. "We did not build the Prometheus fleet to conquer the galaxy," said. "We built it to prevent anyone from conquering us." "But surely you want something. All species want something." "We want to be left alone," sipped her whiskey. "We want to grow at our own pace, make our own mistakes, find our own path through the universe. We do not want to rule others, Ambassador. Ruling is exhausting. Empires require constant maintenance. They breed resentment and rebellion, and eventually they collapse under their own weight." She looked out the window at the stars. "We studied history very carefully when we first made contact with the galaxy. We studied the Conquered's history. We saw how species that challenged you openly were destroyed. We saw how species that submitted completely became servants forever. Neither option was acceptable. So you chose a third path." "Yes, we chose to appear weak while building strength. We chose patience over pride. We chose to prepare for a moment we hoped would never come, while making sure that if it did come, we would be ready." Was quiet for a long moment. "And now that you have revealed your strength, what happens?" "That depends largely on you, on the Conquered, on whether the galaxy can accept that the old order has changed. The Conquered will not simply accept human equality. Too many pride themselves on being superior to younger species. They will learn." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the softness. "Or they will not. Either way, humanity will continue on its path. The fleet exists to ensure that this remains our choice, not anyone else's." She finished her whiskey and set the glass down. "You asked me why we do not demand anything. The answer is that we already have what we want: security. The knowledge that no one can force us to submit ever again. Everything else, all the trade agreements and diplomatic relationships and cultural exchanges, those can be negotiated between equals. And for the first time since we joined the galactic community, we are equals." Thought about this for a long time. He thought about his species' long history of dominance. He thought about all the younger civilizations they had absorbed or destroyed. He thought about how confident he had been just weeks ago when he had delivered the ultimatum to these same humans. "I think," he said finally, "that my people have made a great mistake." "You made a very common mistake. You assumed that silence meant weakness. Many have made that mistake throughout human history. The result has rarely been pleasant for anyone involved." "What happens to those who made threats against you? To me specifically?" Looked at him with something that might have been compassion. "Nothing. You were doing your job as you understood it. You were following the rules of a system that had worked for 100,000 years. You could not have known that the rules had changed." She stood and offered her hand, a human gesture of respect. "Go home, Ambassador. Tell your people what you have learned. Help them understand that humanity is not their enemy and has no desire to be. The galaxy is large enough for all of us. We would prefer to be friends." Looked at the offered hand. In his entire career, no human had ever offered him such a gesture. They had always bowed. They had always shown submission. He took her hand. "I will try," he said, "but many will not listen. Many will see your restraint as weakness and try again." Smiled. It was a warmer smile than the one she had shown in the Conquered chambers. "Then they will learn the hard way. We have been patient before. We can be patient again. The fleet will be there if we need it. And if we do not need it, it will wait in the darkness, watching and protecting for as long as necessary." She released his hand and walked toward the door. "Welcome to the new galaxy, Ambassador. I hope you find it to your liking." Terra revealed its secret. Cosmic quiet ensued. Part 5: The New Quiet. A century passed, and the galaxy was quiet. Historians would later call this era the Long Quiet. It was not peace in the traditional sense. Species still competed for resources. Governments still argued over borders. Old grudges still simmered beneath the surface of diplomatic smiles. But there were no wars. Not a single major conflict in 100 years. This was not because the civilizations of the galaxy had suddenly become enlightened. It was not because they had learned to love each other or discovered the brotherhood of all intelligent life. It was because of what waited in the darkness between stars. The Prometheus fleet was never seen after that first revelation. The 18 returned to their hidden places and no sensor ever found them again. But everyone knew they were out there, watching, waiting, a reminder that somewhere in the void humanity's true strength slumbered. And no one wanted to be the conflict that woke it up. The Dominion had a border dispute with the hegemony that had lasted 3,000 years. It ended within a decade of the revelation. Neither side wanted to be seen as aggressive. Neither side wanted to draw human attention. The collective had plans to expand into neutral territory, absorbing smaller species as they always had. Those plans were quietly abandoned. The smaller species suddenly seemed less appealing when there was a chance that humanity might object. Even the ancient rivalry between the Federation and the Republic cooled to mere competition. Sports replaced wars. Economic contests replaced military ones. It was safer for everyone. Terra itself transformed during this century. Free from the constant threat of galactic politics, humanity turned inward. They had always been creative. Now, with security guaranteed, that creativity exploded. Art flourished in ways that amazed the galaxy. Human music spread to 1,000 worlds, and species that had never understood emotion found themselves moved by sounds they could not explain. Human paintings hung in alien galleries. Human stories were translated into 10,000 languages. Science advanced at a pace that made the conquered nervous. Diseases that had plagued humanity for thousands of years were cured, extended. New materials were discovered, new energy sources developed, new technologies created that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. And they shared. That was what surprised the galaxy most. Human medical breakthroughs were transmitted freely to any species that asked. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions were given away without cost. Energy solutions, construction methods, communication technologies, all offered to anyone who wanted them. Humanity asked for nothing in return except one simple thing: respect. Not worship, not submission, just the basic acknowledgement that humans were equals in the galactic community, deserving of the same dignity as any other species. It seemed like a small price to pay. Ambassador lived to see his 200th birthday, ancient by standards. In his final years, he became something of a philosopher, speaking about what he had learned from his encounter with humanity. His last address to the conquered became famous throughout the galaxy. He stood before the same great chamber where he had once delivered an ultimatum to the human delegation. His 4 eyes were clouded with age, but his voice was still strong. "We thought them weak because they did not threaten," he said. "We thought them primitive because they did not conquer. We thought them foolish because they accepted our insults without response. We were wrong about everything." The chamber was silent. Many of the representatives present had not even been born when the revelation occurred. They had grown up in the long quiet, knowing only peace. The humans understood something that took us 100,000 years to learn. True strength is not in the weapon you hold, but in the choice not to use it. They built ships that could destroy the galaxy and let them sleep. They could have become the greatest tyrants in history and chose to become something else entirely. He paused, gathering his strength for what came next. We should have been grateful that they were patient with us. We should have been humbled by their restraint. Instead, we were arrogant. We assumed that our age and our numbers meant we were better than them. His 4 eyes swept across the assembly. "We were fools. Let us never be such fools again." He died 3 days later, peaceful and content. His final words, recorded by his family, were simply, "I wish I could see what they become." Far from the lights of civilization, in the cold darkness between stars, The TSS Prometheus continued its endless patrol. Its crew had been rotated dozens of times over the century. Young officers became old officers, who retired and were replaced by new young officers. The mission never changed. Watch, wait, protect. On the bridge, a young ensign named Maya stood at her station, looking out at the stars. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Director Wei, the man who had overseen the awakening of the fleet 100 years ago. She had grown up on stories of the revelation, of the moment when humanity had shown its true face to the galaxy. "Captain," she said to the woman in the command chair, "do you ever wonder if they will forget, if someday another species will decide to test us?" Captain, great-granddaughter of the woman who had commanded the Prometheus during the revelation, considered the question. It was one that every generation asked. "Probably," she said. "That is how civilizations work. They rise. They grow confident. They start to believe that the old stories are exaggerations, that things have changed, that they are special somehow. And then we remind them." Looked at her young officer with calm eyes. "We are not here to fight wars, Ensign. We are here to prevent them. Every day that the galaxy stays quiet is a day we have succeeded. Every conflict that does not happen is a victory we have won." She turned back to the endless expanse of stars. "Our ancestors built these ships because they understood something important. Peace is not the absence of strength. It is strength that chooses restraint. They gave us the power to destroy and trusted us to use that power to protect." The Prometheus moved through the void, silent and patient, its weapons cold but ready. Somewhere out there, 17 sister ships did the same, an invisible shield around human space, a warning to anyone who might forget. "We will keep the watch," said quietly, "for as long as it takes, for as long as humanity needs us to." On 1,000 worlds, children grew up in peace, knowing nothing of war. Species that had fought for now competed in games and markets instead of battles. Art and science and culture flourished across the galaxy, feeding on the stability that the long quiet provided. And in the darkness between stars, humanity's greatest creation kept its vigil. The galaxy was quiet. Humanity preferred it that way. And somewhere in the void, the Prometheus dreamed of a day when it would no longer be needed at all, when the galaxy would have truly learned to live in peace, not from fear, but from understanding, when the ships could finally rest. That day had not come yet. But humanity was patient. They had always been patient. And they would wait as long as necessary.